I would like to give a little more detail about some of the ideas that I want you to think about when you create your dreamlike landscape using 1, 2, 3 point perspective. Um, First, I want you to just work at getting and achieving 1, 2, and 3 point perspectives. But once you start to feel comfortable with those simple cubes, I'd like you to work on a drawing and work on it for maybe up to 60 minutes and start to use perspective to create a dreamlike landscape. I'm going to give you 4 examples of some surrealist paintings. This is De Chirico. Um, think about, you can see the buildings are in like a 1 point perspective. The buildings on the left and the right, with that colonnade in the center, and yet he's playing with shadows and that harsh light and the little train in the distance on the horizon line, and creating this kind of tension filled landscape while using 1 point perspective. Here's a painting by Rene Magritte. You can see that perspective line, the sort of trees on the left side of the composition receding back into a 1 point perspective. This sort of purplish trees in shadow on the right side of the composition receding back to that same one. The sky has a pattern of a wall or a ceiling or something, but you can see the pattern is receding to that 1 point perspective, and the brick work in the brick wall in the foreground also going to that 1 point perspective is a good example. We have something in the foreground. I wouldn't say the figure is exactly in the middle ground, but it's definitely behind the brick wall, and then we have something in the far distance. That, along with the 1 point perspective, creates that illusion of space. By using color, the flattening of the figure to some extent, this odd sort of pattern in the sky, it creates this kind of dreamlike landscape that feels kind of normal, but just off, partially through the use of color, right? But the 1 point perspective is creating this dreamlike landscape. And let's look at, here's a Salvador Dali, a very famous one, The Persistence of Memory. You can kind of get the idea of this cube in this perspective. It's kind of distorted a little bit and maybe not even exactly accurate, which might even help create some of that distortion, and the landscape seems to be melting. There's kind of a horizon line, this other cube here, this rectangle. It's not quite a cube. I keep saying cube and I mean rectangle. In a form of perspective, along with other strange things in the landscape. This melting clock, this I don't know, this sort of fetal person, animal thing that's ants on the watch, the melting of the metal to almost be like rubber or fabric or skin, right? Creates this uncomfortable feeling, but the perspective also helps do that. So these are some of the ideas. I want you to have fun and invent a landscape and draw, use charcoal, use graphite, and play with your 1 and 2 point perspective, but have fun. And then this last one by Dali is a good example, probably the best example today. This sort of checkerboard in 2 point perspective, and then this three-dimensional hypercube kind of cross in 2 point perspective. Other cubes floating out in front of Christ on the cross. And then that distant horizon landscape. That's what makes this sort of this extreme image, right? The vanishing point would be off the image, and somewhere way over here maybe, would be the vanishing point, right? So the vanishing point isn't even on the same image. It's off the image, which gives this extreme perspective. This 3 point perspective, actually, it's like the 3 point perspective drawing. You can see the distortion of this upper corner. So this landscape, this dreamlike landscape, by using 1, 2, 3 point perspective, that's what I'd like you to do. Make it a 60-minute drawing and have fun with that. Spend time and get a handle on the drawing of the simple cubes. And then once you kind of have a handle of that, I want you to invent and draw. Think about all your mark making, the exercises we've been doing, the variety of mark making. Your dreamlike landscape could be a narrative. It could have that illogic of a dream, where a dream seems to have a story, but things are put together in a way that don't quite make sense, almost surreal, like some of these paintings I'm sharing with you now. So that's the idea for the 60-minute drawing.